A comprehensive reading list for new and experienced Marxists, for the aspiring party, revolutionary, and warfighter. 3 keys to success. Read, read, read. V.I. Lenin. When this quote is typed into Google, our ever-present and ever-adored, not AI companion gifts us with this wonderfully stupid explanation. The quote is attributed to Vladimir Lenin. While it's a concise and memorable message, it's important to remember that Lenin was a political revolutionary, and his definition of success likely differed significantly from modern perspectives. I would beg to fucking differ. Is the day of the political revolutionary gone? Certainly not. And now more than ever, we need a revolutionary force capable of usurping the powers that are actively killing us. In addition, on what planet is there a definition of success that doesn't involve being educated? As a man of Earth, I find myself reading on a daily basis, in multiple formats as quickly as I can, usually. I am somewhat reluctant to mention that I'm part of the camp of frenzied intersectional literaries, impressed upon by his own mortality and the remarkably short period of time that I have left here. There's a lot to learn and a lot to apply. However, especially if you don't read so often, it's important to be intentional with what you read. This list is meant to help. The collection is broken into 2 partitions, one for newer theorists and another for more experienced practitioners. Feel free to skip to what you need. Hyperlinks are provided where available. Section 1. Texts for New Marxists. V.I. Lenin, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. Penned in 1916, this is a text that I personally regard to be as foundational as the Manifesto, and a hell of a lot more informative. The book explores monopoly capitalism as the development of capitalism from free competition to a stage dominated by monopolies, cartels, and trusts. It explains finance capital as the merger of banking and industrial capital, leading to the rise of financial oligarchies that control vast sectors of the global economy. The piece analyzes how imperialist powers have divided the world amongst themselves, economically and territorially, leading to inter-imperialist rivalries and wars. See the Russo-Ukrainian War. It also describes a concept integral to my understanding of the contemporary movement: the labor aristocracy, serving as a social base for opportunism. This text is absolutely fundamental for understanding the current global capitalist system. I hope that by reading this you can grasp that capitalism is not a purely national phenomenon, but a global, exploitative system driven by imperialist expansion. Friedrich Engels, Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. This text offers an essential critique of utopian socialism, discussing earlier thinkers like Owen, Saint-Simon, and even Fourier, sadly not of mathematical fame. These predecessors envisioned ideal societies but lacked a scientific understanding of historical development and the means to achieve their goals. The book provides an explanation of the development of historical materialism, a critical concept in the field. It also illustrates the application of dialectical materialism to understand economic changes, class contradictions, and the inevitable crisis of capitalism. My favorite part is that it describes the proletarian revolution as a scientific necessity. The contradictions within capitalism lead to its downfall and the rise of the proletariat as the revolutionary class. Karl Marx, Wage, Labor, and Capital. Here Marx provides an incessantly needed introduction to the value theory of labor, another critical concept. It gives a brief definition of capital and labor, showing how labor power itself becomes a commodity. The text illustrates the concept of surplus value, showing how capitalist profit is generated from the unpaid labor of the worker. By demonstrating the exploitative nature of capitalism, Marx also constructs an understanding of the alienation of labor, or how production processes under capitalism isolate workers from the products of their work and their fellow human beings. The best part is that, unlike Marx's Capital, this text is remarkably accessible. I think it provides a valuable utility for revolutionaries to articulate the injustices of the system to fellow workers and build class consciousness based on concrete economic realities. V.I. Lenin, The State and Revolution. For any warfighter of the revolution, this text is indispensable. It clarifies the Marxist understanding of the state, dispelling reformist illusions and underscoring the revolutionary necessity of dismantling the existing state machinery. Within this text, you'll find a strategic framework for understanding the goal of proletarian power via the dictatorship of the proletariat and the nature of revolutionary governance. It also provides another concept that I would regard to be foundational: the withering away of the state as a result of lacking class antagonisms. Mao Zedong, on Contradiction. This text, to me, provides the best foundational explanation of Marx's dialectic. Using the term contradiction, dialectics are found to encompass all things and drive development. The work provides valuable definitions for principal and secondary contradictions, as well as antagonistic and non-antagonistic contradictions. It applies dialectics to the broader revolution, showing how these philosophical principles are crucial for analyzing concrete situations, formulating correct strategies, and resolving problems in revolutionary struggle. Most crucially, the work stresses the importance of self-criticism and learning from errors through the application of dialectical thinking. As a former member of a functional Marxist-Leninist party, I would forever argue the necessity of this point. Section 2, Advanced Texts. V.I. Lenin, Two Tactics of Social Democracy in the Democratic Revolution. As the revolutionary progresses further through their education and practical experience, they will find broad and significantly dense camps of opposition. Lenin had to deal with the Mensheviks, and here he argues at their expense that the proletariat should not be a junior partner to the bourgeois in the democratic revolutions, but rather the leading force, forming an alliance with the peasantry. I'd encourage you to ask yourself while reading this text, how is the concept of the peasantry applicable to the modern United States, Latin America, Africa, Asia, and Europe? Can you apply Lenin's concepts from imperialism, labeling countries instead of classes? The most critical part of this work is the argument for the necessity of armed insurrection as opposed to peaceful transition. The proletariat has the responsibility of seizing the leadership of any democratic revolution and pushing it forward, avoiding the trap of simply tailing the liberal bourgeoisie. Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth. While I would argue that Sartre's preface leaves much to be desired, here Fanon successfully analyzes the dehumanizing psychological effects of colonialism on the colonized and the process of their liberation through struggle. There is good discussion on violence, not just its role in decolonization, but as a psychological act of reclaiming dignity and humanity. It's an interesting perspective. This text, to me, provides a lot of information that Marxists are typically missing, including the revolutionary role of the peasantry. Again, does this apply? How so? Which is often overlooked by the urban centrist. It bridges the gap between classical Marxism and the realities of the global South. In addition, it gives an essential peek into the psychology of liberation. Eduardo Galeano, Open Veins of Latin America, 5 Centuries of the Pillage of a Continent. Any self-respecting Marxist would label themselves, if such a label was actually necessary, as a historical materialist. In doing so, the same Marxist must have a good understanding of history. This work provides a sweeping historical account of the systematic exploitation of Latin America's natural resources and labor by European colonial powers and later global capitalism. The text details certain mechanisms of underdevelopment, explaining how the extraction of wealth and imposition of exploitative economic structures have led to Latin America's persistent economic stagnation. The key concept here is referred to as dependency theory, and in practice it is indeed illustrated how the development of imperialist nations is intrinsically linked to the underdevelopment of the periphery. Michel Foucault, Discipline and Punish, The Birth of the Prison. This work was recommended to me some time ago by one of my most educated and disciplined comrades. While Foucault is not a Marxist, his analysis of power, discipline, and surveillance is invaluable for understanding the mechanisms of social control employed by the capitalist state beyond purely economic coercion. Understanding these subtle, pervasive forms of power is crucial for revolutionary organizing, counter-surveillance, and building resilience against repression that extends beyond overt violence. It allows for a more nuanced understanding of how consent is manufactured and resistance suppressed. When viewed through a Marxist lens, it can illuminate the specific disciplinary forms that serve capitalist accumulation and how they can be subverted. Karl von Clausewitz on war. This piece is specifically for the war-fighting revolutionary. While Clausewitz wrote from the perspective of state warfare, Marxists like Lenin and Mao have applied his insights to revolutionary and class warfare. Understanding war as a continuation of politics is critical for linking military strategy directly to revolutionary political objectives. The text provides a framework for analyzing the strategic landscape, the nature of conflict, and the relationship between political goals and armed struggle, helping to avoid adventurism or capitulation and to understand the material and political conditions necessary for victory. And that's the list. No matter where you're at in your travels, I hope that you found some new reads and some insight into what you'll be reading. It was a pleasure to finally write it down. The inklings of this edition have been bouncing about in the workings of my mind for years. There's an extended version of this edition available for purchase on my Gumroad. The link is in the video description. I'd appreciate if you checked it out. Providing files in this way is a valuable method of ensuring I can continue to write long term. Reading these texts is not a passive act. It is a vital part of arming ourselves for the struggle ahead. Each text should be read critically, discussed in study groups, and applied to the concrete conditions of our ongoing fight for liberation. The revolution demands disciplined minds as much as it demands courageous hearts. This video essay is a spoken format of my newsletter, The Revolutionary Horizon. If you'd like to read the original editions or anything I haven't gotten into video format yet, you can find it on my Substack, brucedcrockett.substack.com. There should be a link in the video description. If you'd like to support my work, consider subscribing here or on Substack.